Welcome! This video contains an introduction, an interview so you can gain deeper understanding of the subject from spirit level, and a group frequency calibration so you can start to clear the frequency distortion patterns around this topic. Enjoy! Hi everyone, my name is Karen Cheong and I'm here with my co-host Dennis Kelly. One of the biggest questions that many of us ask ourselves is, why am I here? For many, that translates into, how do I serve, contribute, give back? And for others, not knowing what our purpose is can cause us to feel empty, without direction, without fulfillment. So today we're going to be talking about purpose from the spirit perspective, how it's likely different than what you imagine, and how you can begin to discover yours from that perspective. So let's jump right in. Dennis?
You know, Karen, in visiting with folks, I find so often, and it really doesn't make any difference what age group, but always asking that question, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah. So what I would say is the most effective way to answer that question is not through your mind. And that might be frustrating because you think to yourself, listening, I imagine, well then what the heck am I supposed to use if I'm not supposed to be using my mind? So what I'll say is at the very end of this particular interview, there's a group frequency calibration that you can listen to, which is a guided meditation. And because of the frequency work that's being done, it will start to open that up for you. Now it's very difficult to answer that question or be clear enough after one session to be able to receive that. So I am going to offer a deep dive where there's going to be a series of 3, which will help you begin to start to answer that. So what I would say about purpose is that we have a general purpose that we're here for, and then we have individuated purposes, so individually. And we usually have, everyone thinks we have one. You actually probably have more than one, or more than one function that you're here to serve. So what I would say is, first of all, most people in our culture tend to lump purpose with vocation, or what you do for career.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily the same. And people think, oh, I have to do what it is that my purpose is. It's actually not true. Our general overarching purpose, generally, okay, I'm not saying this is your only thing, but generally, for us here in bodies, is that we are here to experience form and density, to then transcend it, to remember our spirit nature and who we truly are. So that's our general overarching purpose. And it sounds like almost too simple, I imagine.
Yeah, like what?
Well, I'm already here in a body. Okay, check. So it does sound oddly simple, but it is that simple. To experience density for beings that are infinite consciousness, infinite disembodied consciousness, to come into a form, to be limited by the form, and also have the experience of form, the intensity of the emotion, the pleasurableness of the senses, even the things that aren't very pleasant. We don't usually experience that. I mean, imagine if for just a second, you can imagine, you're disembodied infinite consciousness, which you are, and you don't have any of that. It's much more diffuse. The experience is much, much more diffuse and not nearly as intense. And we also don't have this feeling that we're going to die because you're infinite consciousness and you are aware of that. So we have all these sort of things thrown at us when we're in the body that we think are limitations. And then to transcend that and remember who we truly are, that's really the overarching general purpose that we all have. And then we have individual things we're here to do. So I'm not, people think they have to save the whales, they have to save their Amazon, or they have to save something, or they have to save something else. I'm talking about your general purpose to being here is to be in the body. Yeah.
You know, one of the things that helped me there is the fact that you started out by saying that probably the first thing you have to do is kind of separate career or your job or, it from truly what your purpose is as a human. So, because I know a lot of folks, they come to the end of their career and they feel kind of shallow. It's like, I put in I put in all this time and effort and energy. And I was successful from a career standpoint, but now I sit here and ask myself, what now?
Exactly.
What? I don't feel like I fulfilled my purpose.
Exactly.
And I don't even know what my purpose is. Yeah.
And should I get one? Right, because the emphasis is all in the doing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And so the lovely thing about frequency work is as you start to clear your distortion patterns, you start to return to the sense of wholeness, completeness that I have mentioned before many times. And as we do that, we step into more of a sense of beingness as opposed to having to do something particular. So what does beingness mean? It's very difficult to understand beingness until you experience it. And I know that's really irritating potentially to some people because you're like, okay, I don't even know what that means. And it's difficult to describe. It's almost like trying to describe a taste. Like, how do you describe a taste? It's difficult to translate what that means to somebody. Beingness, however, is a state where you start to recognize that it doesn't really matter what you do. And that's exactly the point. So what you choose to do can be an expression of your beingness, which is in fact what you're here to essentially do, which is to experience form, transcend it, and move into this beingness state. And then it really becomes irrelevant how you express it. Now you get to express it however you want. That's the fun bit, right? That's how people are like, well, I really feel called to do sound healing. I really feel called to act. I really feel called to be a doctor or, or an acupuncturist or whatever it is that you're called to do, right? And that's really fantastic. And that is an expression of your purpose, which is to experience form and then come back into remembering of your beingness. And so you get to express that. But it's not like if you don't do that thing, then somehow you failed. That's the thing that most people get caught up in. Like, if I don't find my purpose, then somehow I'm going to fail. You're not going to fail. You're not going to fail. If you focus on the just awakening process, however that looks, and I talk about it in terms of frequency work because that's the work that I'm familiar with and which I do. It's also the fastest that I personally have encountered, which is why I started doing it myself. So, but it's really this marvelous thing. And once you become unencumbered with this idea that you have to find the thing, then it's really freeing because then you're like, okay, well, I could do really anything. It doesn't really matter what it is. And all you have to do is experience being in your body, which is pretty easy because you're in it, and becoming very present. And as you remove the distortions, your natural sense of beingness will come in. And then all the other stuff becomes quite irrelevant. Yeah.
So I think you've set a new record.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
During this video segment.
Right. What does that mean?
You've gone this whole time and you haven't said the word distortion.
Ah. Yes.
But I've got a feeling, I've got a sense that, when you ask or visit with somebody about just your true being, and that does sound wonderful, but I think for a lot of us that could be quite a challenge.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it is. And as you say, the distortion patterns around us form our thoughts and our ideas and our expectations and what it is that we think we have to do. These are all just thought forms and lineage patterns and cultural conditioning and religious conditioning. To be a good provider, a good father, a good mother, a good wife, a good daughter, a good brother, a good, whatever it is that we're supposed to be doing. In part, these are our obligations, which form to some of us, or many of us, this idea of how we were supposed to be in the world. In part, our purpose, right, is supposed to be these good fill in the blank, right? So, and that's interesting because then who are you doing that for? Are you doing it for someone else? Are you really doing it for yourself? What's driving that? What distortion patterns are causing that? So it's all a very expectation, obligation, all that stuff is a result of distortion pattern. You remove these things and all of a sudden you really just don't care. And it sounds callous, but it's not. It's a freeing. Because then it's sort of like, okay, well, I understand why that expectation is there. I understand why that obligation is there. I understand why they want me to do this. And actually, that's not relevant to me at this point. Okay, because you become free of that. Now, some people might get really upset by that, like, oh no, that's not good or whatever, and that's okay. And notice how bound you are by those things. Yeah.
So, what came to me as you were walking through that is, we have a lot of parents or grandparents listening to this.
Yeah.
And so they themselves, in many cases, are still asking that question.
Yeah.
What is my purpose? Why am I here? But then you've got, those patterns in the family that you were talking about. And so the last thing we want to do as a parent or a grandparent is kind of lay that on our children.
Yeah.
Surrounded by a lot of fear or anxiety,
Yeah, well, I think whether or not you do it consciously or verbally or physically, it's running through you frequency-wise.
Yeah.
So, and I realize that might cause a lot of anxiety for people who are like, oh, great, well, then it really doesn't matter what I do because they're getting it anyway, right? And to some degree, yes, it's true. I mean, they are going to be receiving the lineage patterns that you're passing through yourself into them. And that's not a bad thing. Okay, I just want to say, it's not necessarily bad because it sounds like all lineage patterns are terrible. They're not. Okay, there are things in your lineage that have become wisdom, that have become learnings, that are efficiencies. So you don't want to toss that baby out with the bathwater, right? So you keep the things that are good that you've learned from your lineage, and you just release the things that are no longer serving. So I would say to parents, I mean, I know there's so much pressure, right? You have to do things right. You want to make sure the kids are eating properly, that they're getting the right schooling, and who are they with, and then, oh my gosh, what's happening in our culture, and how much electronic stuff are they exposed to, right? There's a whole host of things that can possibly go wrong, and I get it, it's a lot. And don't add to it by wondering about, do I have to condition them for purpose? The lineage patterns that are coming to them for a reason, and if they will, in their lifetime, choose to transcend it, that is their part of their purpose. So it's perfect the way it is. So don't add that to your list of things to freak out about.
That takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
But as a parent or a grandparent, just to have that awareness.
Yes.
To have that.
Totally. And just notice and it's not just with children, it's with anyone around you. When you're trying to get someone to do something particularly, at least for me, I start to ask myself, why do I want them to do that? Why am I trying to get someone to do something other than what they're currently doing? Why do I need to control them in that way? Okay, so I'll use Chris, my husband. If I'm asking him, hey, what are you doing that for? Why do I care what he's doing that for? Are we in a rush? Why it's my agenda? So it's an interesting thing to ask. Why am I trying to notice if I'm trying to get him to do something different than what he's doing towards what I want him to do? Well, that's kind of interesting. Why am I trying to control him in that way? So it's just to notice in our most intimate relationships, because those are the easiest ones, because we think we know better often, right? And the other person, well, of course I know better what's good for them, right? So, I mean, hello, but exactly. But, so it's just an interesting opportunity to ask oneself, okay, well, am I really neutral here? Am I really what's happening? So, and then in the greater context of purpose, just, to ask yourself, well, just allow that person to be, because their purpose is theirs alone. Theirs alone, not yours, theirs. And it's their path and their journey. So take your hands out of their thing, because it's really disrespectful, I feel, to try and meddle. It's like saying to them, you don't even know what you're doing. You need my help because you can't possibly figure this out on your own. Well, that's not true. Would you want that to happen to you? No, I wouldn't personally. So anyhow, it's just to notice that. Yeah. And then also to note that, if you continue, even if you don't know what your purpose is and you think it's a doing, I have to do something, join a group, do something, whatever, once we can let go of that, if we do the frequency work and let go of that need to know what that is, because oftentimes that's just because we have a sense of we want a certain sense of certainty. Oh, I found the thing. I found it. I'm good. I've got the thing. I know what the purpose is now. I'm fulfilled. Yes, check, right? So just notice if that just gives you a certain sense of certainty, if that's why you want it. And notice that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's human, okay? But just notice if that's why you want to know so badly. Now, if it's a sense of I'm trying to feel full or trying to feel fulfilled or whole or complete, that's because your spirit is trying to wake you up and be okay, well, now it's time to remove these distortion patterns so you can become whole, complete. Or remember your whole, it's not that it's to remember your wholeness, your completeness from within. Yeah.
And I'm sure another factor that sneaks in there is the ego.
Oh my goodness.
Is that,
when does it not come in?
So I would like to impress you with.
Yes, my vastly magnanimous purpose. Yes.
Yeah. Look at my degrees. Look at my accomplishments. Look at what I've done.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And
That's
so allow that. You just have to allow that.
Yep. And the other thing that I would also like to mention is that a lot of people feel, because of the way things are laid out for us around purpose in our culture, that your purpose has to be to help someone else. That's not necessarily true. It can be to help other people, and that's great. In fact, if you help lots of people, that's wonderful. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with it. And what I would say is, if that's what you feel called to, please be sure that you are stable first yourself, internally.
It starts here.
It starts with you, because if you are unbalanced and you're dragging all these people with you, then you just bring them into chaos. It's sort of like this analogy that I have of, if you're walking by a river, you're walking along a riverbed, okay, and there's a raging river with lots of like class 5 rapids right next to you, and the bank of the river is really rocky. So you're trying to maintain balance, and the rocks are slippery, and it's jagged and all that stuff. Now, if you're unbalanced yourself and you're trying to help someone along who's very young, 5 years old or older, even in their elder, and you're trying to help them walk, if you're unstable, you're just going to pull them into the water if you fall. So you need to be really certain that you are stable yourself before you, quote unquote, start helping other people. Serving other people is fantastic. It's great. Yeah. But ask yourself first, are you internally stable enough in terms of your spirit growth to help others? And are you doing this really out of pure heart? Or are you doing it because you want accolades? Are you doing it because you want everyone to be like, wow, look how wonderful I am because I'm serving in this way? So there's nothing wrong with that, because we're human, and one of the basic human needs is like wanting to be recognized as significant, and having this feeling of I'm special. So there's nothing wrong with it, but just notice if that's what's driving you, if you need to be recognized in that way. So if you can recognize it, then you can let it go. That's the wonderful thing about it. So it's just about, this whole process is about not only letting go of the frequency patterns, but noticing the frequency patterns that we tend to have, the ones that happen over and over again that drive us. And the reason is because once you see that sucker, you can let it go. But if you don't see it, it's pretty darn hard to let the thing go. Right? If you're not even aware that you're holding this like heavy, 10-pound weight that you've had your whole life, how can you let it go? It's just part of you. Right? But if all of a sudden you have awareness around it, you're like, oh, look, there's this 10-pound weight here. Well, maybe I can put that down. All right? It's like if you're not paying attention to your nose, you're not really aware that it's there, but all of a sudden you think about your nose, oh, there it is. It's the same thing. So anyway.
Well, I think you've given us a completely different perspective around purpose and what it truly means. And so thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Karen, could you help me? I hear so often when I look at your video or your website, GFC. Exactly what is that?
A GFC is a group frequency calibration, which looks a lot like a guided meditation on a particular topic. And what I'm doing is I'm helping you to remove the distortion patterns of that particular topic. And because you're coming together as a mastermind in a group to connect to pure source even more and to clear the distortion patterns of this particular topic, what happens is a tremendous amount of momentum starts to happen because of the energetic of the entire group, and each individual is able to move faster and ascend higher than they could have on their own. Welcome everyone to the Group Frequency Calibration on Do We Have a Purpose? So becoming very aware of your position relative to the inanimate objects in the room, specifically 3. So just pick any 3. Notice your relative position to them. And once you have completed that, becoming aware of your body. Meaning, how is your weight being held? Do you have tension in your body? Are you relaxed? Just noticing your body. And then bringing your attention, awareness, focus to your xiphoid process, which is right at the base of your sternum. So your sternum is that big, thick bone in the center of your chest where your ribs meet in front of your body. Right at the base of that, where it's where it becomes flesh, if you press that point, it's a little bit sore or tender. That's your xiphoid process. Keeping your attention here as you inhale, holding your breath in for as long as you think you can. And then whenever you're ready, exhaling all of the air out of your lungs and holding your breath out for as long as you think you can. For those of you with very long breaths, you may want to pause this recording until you complete your breath and return. For the rest of us, bringing our attention to our solar plexus between the base of your sternum and your belly button, breathing normally here. And as I wait for the mastermind to gel, please note that I'm working on you both on the group and the subgroup level, and that I will be making noises on my end. So you likely will hear me hum or yawn, even though I'm not tired, or exhale sharply. And more, I'm working at higher level frequencies, which requires me to work in silence. This is beneficial to you because with the very high frequencies, I can remove more of the distortion patterns more quickly with less detox for you. Okay? So just note, if none of that makes sense, that if I'm working in silence, I'm still working on you. Good. The mastermind has just gelled. So let's go ahead and ask ourselves the following question. How can I become even more aware of my connection only to pure source? And that question again is, how can I become even more aware of my connection only to pure source? And as you ask yourself that question, please imagine, sense, feel, or become aware of a brilliance deep, deep within your body that becomes brighter, more shimmery, expanding out through all of your cells, through your flesh, including your back body, and ultimately out through the pores of your skin. Yeah. And on my end, I'm working to increase your natural bandwidth so you can take in higher levels of pure source frequency. Nice. So bringing your attention, please, between your throat and your heart space. I don't mean your physical heart. I mean your heart space in the center of your chest, in your nipple line. Bringing your attention between your throat and your heart space. Okay. So this is the distortion pattern, or the thought form, that your purpose is something that you have to do as your vocation, that you have to do something, right? That there needs to be an outward expression of your purpose. So this is not true. So let's just remove this, because this is a really big stumbling block for many people, this distortion pattern. Okay, and it actually blocks if there is to be an outward expression of that, from that coming in, because you get bound up and what is it? Okay, and what do I have to do? So let's just remove this. And at the same time, release the attachment to the certainty that thinking that you know what your purpose is. Okay, there's a lot of charge around that. So if you think you know what your purpose is, then all of a sudden, oh, it's safe. I know what it is. I have my mission. So let's release that at the same time. Okay? Keeping your attention in that space. Good. And now in your solar plexus, between your belly button and the base of your sternum, this is the distortion pattern of the attachment to the story of purpose. So meaning that you could tell people what it is that your mission is, what your purpose is, all that stuff. That you yourself have a story about this and therefore feel better about it. Okay, because you feel like you're on path somehow. So let's remove this, not because it's bad to have things that are more on purpose for you. It's just that removing the story around it will free you up to receive or be open to purpose from a higher order, and to not be attached if you don't know what it is yet. Okay? Because, and we're going to remove this at the same time, a lot of you, a large subgroup of you, spiral into self-judgment and blame when you don't know what your purpose is. Like you're kind of a loser because you don't know what it is. That's not true. Okay? So let's remove all this from the solar plexus. Yeah. Nice. Bring your attention back to your xiphoid process. This is the distortion pattern that your purpose is to be a doing as opposed to a being. That beingness somehow isn't sufficient. Good. So now bringing your attention between your belly button all the way up to your heart space. Okay, so this has to do with the distortion around being what looks like purposeless. Okay, so there's all the self-judgment around not having a purpose and comparison to other people who appear to have a purpose and therefore have it all handled somehow. Like somehow they're better because they quote unquote have a purpose. So I'm going to remove all this distortion around that. Okay, all the judgment of self, all the comparison to other, because that's not what it's about. Your purpose is in your beingness. It's to be very present in your body, to then transcend the forgetting that we are one with the divine. So this illusion of separateness. Okay, that's what it's about. So being in your body and transcending the illusion of separateness. That's it. So whether you go save the whales or the rainforest or the whatnot is fine, and it's lovely, and you can do that, or you don't have to. And if you just were in your body and remembered or realized, whichever, that we are not separate from pure source, then it is enough. So removing all this judgment stuff, shame also in there as well, and low self-worth, non-deserving, not good enough if I don't have a purpose. So removing all of this huge bundle of distortions. Okay. Yep. Very nice. Yum. Good. Yep. Now bring your attention from your belly button all the way up to your throat. Okay? In the center line. So if you can imagine a line that's drawn between these 2 points in the center of your body, please become aware of that center line. Yep. So, for many of us, in order for one of our purposes to come in, or let's just call it that, it requires, especially if we're waiting for something that is of a higher order, it requires a certain level of surrender to time, meaning divine timing. When is it ready for you? Right? So we think that we're ready, but really it requires that we release even more of who we think we are and surrender to divine timing. In order for that to be revealed. Okay? So, now this is not just in relation to purpose, it's just generally speaking. This is just about awakening. So, but there's a discomfort with that. And it shows up within the context of purpose, but it's really about everything. If that makes sense. It's like it's a microcosm for a greater issue. So let's just remove this, or it's actually these, because it's more than one thing. Yeah. Good. Now bring your attention please to your lower ribs. All right. So this is another pattern of low self-worth, non-deserving. And it's a distortion pattern around like a feeling of failure. Like if you don't somehow attain your purpose or express your purpose, you will have failed, and somehow you will have wasted this lifetime and will no longer be on path, or something like this. So let's remove this because there's a lot of pressure. All right, so let's just remove this. So you can be open without having all this pressure to find something, or you will have messed up or something. So let's just remove all this. There we go. Yeah. This will allow you more ease. Yeah. Very nice. Bring your attention now to your solar plexus, between your belly button, the base of your sternum. Just working on your pain bodies to integrate you. Excellent. I'm going to leave you in this space for as long as you'd like, and I look forward to working with you on the next GFC.